question is whether we're actually, wiser for, the previous round of economic development in Africa. I would hope so, and I think that we are living in a more technologically, knowledgeable era, which allows us to embrace these types of trade relations differently as well. So the world today is a lot more connected than it was, let's say, 50 years ago, and there's a lot more transparency about what's going on. If you think about the copper belt and the investment in there, 50 years ago, that would not have been as transparent as to what are the issues in the copper belt in terms of investment from the Chinese in that region, and what's going on from a development point of view as well, and whether it is substantial enough. So we are living in an era where I think there's a lot more transparency around this. Having said that, there's still a need for African countries to coherently organize policy to take these opportunities in hand and beneficiate from them in a manner that creates a social development sustainably as well in the continent. I find that we are still battling with that as a continent. Maybe 50 years ago there were no policies, or there were very little policies that were created. Certainly not in this day and age, where we've got economic policy, we've got skills policies, you've got energy policies. There's a whole plethora of a whole universe of policies out there that countries are starting to look at. The question is whether they can integrate these in a manner that says, well, this is the strategy now going forward. And that's what we find at the moment, is that a lot of the countries, a lot of the nations are still dabbling in bits and pieces of this, rather than looking at, well, how do we pull the whole thing together at a country level and really take that forward. There are some countries that are doing well in this front. I think Mozambique, as an example, in terms of its GDP growth and how it's embracing foreign direct investment in the country, is certainly looking at it in a structured manner. Whether beneficiation is materially created out of that remains to be seen. But that is an example nonetheless. Similarly, South Africa, with what we're trying to do in terms of different sectoral development with the PICC, that is a good example of creating a structured approach with which to develop infrastructure in a country. I guess the next step for South Africa is to make sure that the skills development policies, the different sectoral policies from an energy perspective and so on, are all aligned back to economic policy, and that we can then go beyond a 2 to 3% GDP growth. So this would be some of the key lessons to take away from this is, can we achieve this in a coherent policy environment? So the ball, I think, is firmly in government's court, all governments in Africa, to try and leverage government in a much more effective manner to embrace foreign direct investment.